Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Moss Show, where, of course, each and every week we come and we talk about the decentralized revolution, the way the world is changing right now, right before our very eyes. We're living through a period that will be discussed in history books for millennia to come. It is that groundbreaking, much like we would talk about the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, or the American Revolution in the 1700s, or the collapse of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's that big what we're witnessing as the pendulum swings from centralization to decentralization, and we look at it through the lens of politics, finance, and technology. Those three pieces, of course, technology is the big disruptor that changes history as we go back and look through it. And at the time when we're going from a centralized world to a decentralized world, a revolution, of course, we have the technology, the decentralized technology, that is Bitcoin, that is changing the world. But of course, we look at it through the lens of those three things, politics, finance, and technology. Those are the revolutions that are happening and changing right before our very eyes, right under our very feet. It's happening faster than we can even keep track, and I make content almost every single day, and I can't keep up with how fast things are going. And of course, I try to bring to you some of the latest breaking news, some education to help you see the world a little bit different, and of course, some very interesting guests. So you don't have to listen to me, in my opinion, all the time. But today I want to talk about something that happened this week. Monumental. That's what it was called. It was called monumental. It may be the biggest thing that's ever happened. Apparently, that's what we're led to believe. It's politics, and it's finance, and of course, it's changing the world. And what I'm talking about today is this brand new bill that was put forward this week. It was signed. Everybody got together and clapped while the president looked like he didn't know where he was at. And this monumental bill that's called the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, it's monumental. It's so big. It's a resurrected plan that's come back from the dead, and it was originally put forth in a plan called Build Back Better. You've probably heard that term 100 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 times. It's not just in America and President Biden using that term Build Back Better. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you've probably seen, if you haven't, you can go find it. Is it a montage, I guess, like a collection of all like the video clips of every single leader, every single like mainstream media news person using that same verbiage. So I don't care if you're Angela Merkel in Germany or Justin Trudeau in Canada or Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum or Joe Biden. Everyone's using the same terminology called Build Back Better, Build Back Better, Build Back Better, Build Back Better. Well, think about that. What does that even mean, build back? So building back would mean that we have to build back something that was previously there, something that maybe was destroyed or broken down or torn down. And so because it was there and it's no longer there because it was destroyed or whatever, then we have to build it back. But this time we're going to do it better, apparently. That's what they have us believe. So it's pretty interesting to think about it if you actually just break that down. Now, why is the whole world, every single leader, every single mainstream leader using the same terminology, Build Back Better? And what is it that they're tearing down in order to build back? Well, of course, that's the world as you know it. Of course, that's what that is. You know, the Great Reset. So apparently, this world that we live in, the life that we have, the American dream that we've had, the American experiment as it's been called, capitalism that's brought more people out of poverty than any other thing in the history of the whole world. Apparently, that's no good. Apparently, it was never good because it was always built on a systemic racism, I guess, or something like that. Apparently. So never mind all the progress that we've had. 300 years ago, we were all living in the dirt, and today we have medicine, and we have science, and we have spaceships, and we have satellites, and we have all this amazing technology. Life has never been better, but it's no good. Let's just tear it all down. Let's reset it. Great reset. And then we'll build it back. Well, I'm not for that. As a matter of fact, I think things are pretty good. Obviously, I'm not happy with the direction things are going. There's plenty of bad things going on in the world, and I point to many of those things, not because I'm a doom and gloomer, but I'm hoping that we can wake up the sleeping lions, I like to say, and we can turn the tide before it's too late. Anyway, the Build Back Better plan that Biden put forward, I think it was like a 1.7 if I'm not mistaken, I have it written down here in my notes. $1.75 trillion plan to build back better is what they called it. $1.75 trillion that they wanted to spend. Now, the House passed it, but then it was shot down in the Senate. So half of the, one part of the government put it through. The House passed it, and then it was declared dead. Now, this was last November, in November of 2021, where the House passed it. And it was 1.75 trillion, which is an insane amount of money. To put that into perspective, in 2008, during the global financial crash, when the entire world melted down, the entire financial system came crumbling down, it took 700 million TARP funds to bail it out, which at that time was insane. It was mind-blowing. I remember living through that and going, no, they can't spend that much money, 700 million. Today, that's a walk in the park. They were trying to push through 1.75 on top of the other multiple trillion-dollar package they had put forward that led us to the point that we're at today. So anyway, Build Back Better got killed, didn't pass, and so they resurrected it from the dead, and this time they've called it something better. They call it the Inflation Reduction Act, because everybody's affected by inflation. It's hurting all these families across, hardworking American families. It's hurting them, and they can't afford the gas, and they can't afford the food. This inflation, it's so bad. As a matter of fact, it's our number one concern. It's Biden's number one concern. It's the Federal Reserve's number one concern. We have to crush inflation no matter what. So let's just name a bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and everybody's going to vote for it, right? I mean, what kind of monster would the politician be to vote against a bill called Inflation Reduction Act when inflation is the number one problem that everyone's concerned about? What kind of monster would vote against that bill? You see how they do that? See how they play that? Now, nobody wanted to Build Back Better because of what I said. Well, that means that you're tearing down the system that we have. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. I mean, maybe some people do, but most people don't. But when you name it something like Save the Puppies Act, I mean, who can vote for that? Vote against that? Nobody could. Who could vote against reducing inflation? Everybody wants to reduce inflation. Oh, the games they play and how easily we are tricked. Well, not you and not me. We see through it. But unfortunately, most people are tricked and they don't see this coming. So big news this week. Like I said, Biden signs the Inflation Reduction Act into law. And there's a lot of other things that went into law as part of that. I'm going to break some of that down, and then I'm going to break down what this really means to you and I, and what are the actual tactical things that are going to change in your life. Because I'm going to tell you right now, they are coming for you, whoever you are. And I'm going to break that down. I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to break down what income category is going to be affected most by this. So we got a lot to cover. All right. So like I said, this week there's a video of Biden sitting at a desk, and you got Manchin and Schumer and all these people standing around him, watching him sign. And he picks up the pen, and if this wasn't audio only, I'd love to show you the video. But he signs this thing, and then everyone's like applauding, and he's like looking around, like he's like, "Where am I?" It's pretty sad. It's kind of like elder abuse, in my opinion. I can almost understand. No, I can understand. Maybe at the time people still thought he was okay and they voted for him. I get that. I could understand that. But at the point we're at today, I mean, how to think that anybody could stand behind that is just mind blowing. This new bill that got signed into law this week. I believe that was on August 17th or August 16th. And this bill was originally titled the Build Back Better bill, and of course nobody wanted that. They killed it, but they brought it back with a better name, Inflation Reduction Act, and who in their right mind could vote against that? And of course it got passed. Now it barely got passed. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, this bill, like I said, was originally a $1.75 trillion bill. But now it's got marked down, and it's much less. As a matter of fact, it's only a mere fraction of that today. But with this law, the American people won, and the special interests lost, Biden said. Really? The American people won, and special interests lost. Well, who are those special interests that lost? I'd like to know that. And who are the American people that won? I'd like to also know that as well. I'm going to break it down, and you tell me which side you're on. I'd love to have you tell me that. If you follow me on social media, you can find me at @1MarkMoss. That's just the number one, @1MarkMoss. Let me know that you're listening to me and which side you fall on this. Did you win or did you lose? Did the American people win or did the special interests lose? All right, so the new law includes a $369 billion investment in climate and energy policies. Now, I've talked about before, I don't have it in front of me, but when all these surveys and polls are being done all the time, and on one of the biggest surveys and polls that was done recently, they asked Americans, what are the number one concerns that you have right now? Climate came in at less than 1% of people's concerns. Now, what they were concerned with is they can't afford gas for their car or steak for their plates. They were concerned about their future. They were concerned about, nuclear war, all these things. But climate was like less than 1%, which is, of course, why they didn't name this like the Climate Change Act. Nobody would have voted for that. They named it the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the number one concern that people have. But none of this goes for that. It goes to investment in climate and energy policies. Wait, so you took the number one concern that we have in the surveys, but then you take all the money and you put it into the less than 1% concern that people have. That seems like a bait and switch to me. It actually sounds like a scam. Now, I don't like to use that word scam. It gets thrown around a lot today. Words start to lose their meanings when you don't use them in the right way. A scam is when I've bought something or I've agreed to something and you give me something different than what I've agreed to. If I bought an apple from you, but instead you gave me a grape, you scammed me, okay? When I bought into reducing inflation, which was my main concern, but what you gave me was climate and energy, which I care nothing about, you scammed me, okay? I'm just going to call it straight up. That's what it is. You scammed me. $64 billion to extend a policy under the Affordable Care Act to reduce health insurance costs. That's another great one. Affordable Care Act. Isn't that great? It used to be called Obamacare. Affordable Care Act. Since the Affordable Care Act went into place, my health insurance costs went up. They became less affordable. See how that works? It's always the opposite. I'd love to hear about your experience, but in my experience, for my very young, healthy family of 4, we spend a lot of money and time and effort on our health. We eat real food, not processed garbage and sludge. We spend time exercising. We spend our time and effort listening to podcasts and experts to be even more healthy and all these things that we can do. We're young, we're healthy, we spend money doing that. And my insurance for my family of 4 went from a few $100s a month to over $1,700 per month for my family of 4. That's after tax dollars, I'll have you. So the Affordable Care Act. It sure didn't make it more affordable for me, that's for sure. But anyway, so $64 billion to extend a policy under that to reduce health insurance costs, not reduce my health insurance costs. I'll pay more, so a few of you could pay less. That's how that works. And a 15% corporate minimum tax aimed at companies that earn more than $1 billion a year. That's great. Hey, they should pay their fair share, right? Nobody's going to vote against that. That sounds great. The $437 billion spending package is expected to raise $737 billion in revenue over the next decade. So it went from a $1.7 trillion bill to a $437 billion package. So that's, fraction, 25%. Now, I love how they say the $437 billion bill will raise $737 billion back. So it's an investment, right? It's an investment. We should put it as an investment memorandum. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The biggest share coming from reductions in drug prices for Medicare recipients and tax hikes on corporations. So that sounds good. Roughly $124 billion is expected to come from increased IRS enforcement. We're going to talk about that. So they're going to increase IRS enforcement on you You spent $600 on Venmo? Up, we better shine a flashlight up your butt. We better see what happened with that money because somehow you probably didn't pay tax, and so we need to get that money. So we're going to spend $124 billion. Now, of that $124 billion, of course, they want to hire 87,000 agents, and to spend that, to hire those agents, they want to spend $80 billion. So they believe that if they take $80 billion of this package and give it to the IRS, they'll bring back $124 billion. Probably not. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's dig into this a little bit here. First of all, I'll have you know that the bill narrowly passed the U.S. Senate. Remember, the old one died. Build Back Better died. So they brought it back, and it narrowly passed. It was a 51-50 vote. It won by one vote. And, of course, the tiebreaker was Vice President Kamala, of course, and gave him the win. One thing that I would think about, now, of course, the United States is a republic, not a democracy. But in a democracy, it should be what the people want. Now, if you have to ramrod this through and you can just barely get somebody on your own side to cast the tiebreaker, is that really what the American people want? Is it really? I would think they just have to win by a bigger margin than that. That just doesn't seem right, does it? But let's be clear, it says, quote, in this historic moment, Democrats sided with the American people. That's what they said. That's what Biden said. Did they side with the American people? Is this what the American people want? Well, let's kind of dig into this a little bit for a second. Now, first of all, they call this an investment. Is that true? I want to look at the investment. Then I want to look at the Manchin and what he said behind closed doors after this is over, and you're not going to believe what he said. He said basically that what we said it's named isn't actually what's going to happen. He said that. I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Bill Gates. Where does Bill Gates fit into all this? And then we're going to fact check some of this. All right? And I'm going to tell you what's coming for you. I got a lot to cover when I come back. And we're talking about this new bill, this monumental bill that got signed, the Inflation Reduction Act, that will do none of that. It won't reduce inflation at all. And don't just take my word for it. As a matter of fact, the holdout that killed the original bill, the Build Back Better bill, we're talking about Manchin, he finally admits inflation bill will not help Americans with lower prices. Why would it? Why would it? Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, admitted Tuesday the so-called Inflation Reduction Act will not have an immediate impact on inflation. He admits it. News correspondent Hillary Vaughn asked Manchin on Tuesday whether Democrats misled Americans by claiming the bill would reduce inflation and thus lower the price of everyday goods. Manchin said, quote, "Why would it?" Oh, you can't make this stuff up. His response was, quote, "Why would it?" Well, because it's in the name, because it's literally named the Inflation Reduction Act. Oh my gosh, you can't make this stuff up. He said, well, immediately it's not. We've never said that. We've never said anything would happen immediately. It's not going to turn a switch on and off. He went on to say that that the proper way to respond to an inflation crisis is not by raising interest rates. Okay, so we have this inflation crisis. Everybody's attacking it. The president's attacking it. The Putin price hike, supposedly. We got the Federal Reserve attacking it. The Federal Reserve is attacking it by doing what? Raising interest rates. They're raising interest rates to crush demand. If they can crash your retirement account, if they can crash your home's value, if they can make you feel broke, then you don't go on vacation, you don't go out to dinner, you don't buy new cars. They crush the demand. That's what they're doing. So he says the proper way to respond to an inflation crisis is not by raising interest rates. It's not by crushing demand. So the problem is people can't afford these things. So the way we're going to fix it is by taking away all their money so they don't go buy them. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make sense to you and I because we're rational and we think like normal people. But when when all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And when you're a central banker and all you have is interest rates, I guess the whole world looks like you need to raise interest rates. He says that it's not by raising rates. You've got to produce yourself out of this. Oh, wow, Manchin, he gets it. He gets it. You don't get your way out of inflation by taking away everybody's wealth. You do it by producing yourself out of this. So there's supply and demand. If the price of gas or steak is too high, there's two ways to get that price adjusted. Supply and demand. You can either, one, crush demand, which is what the Fed's doing, make everybody poor, or two, you could increase the supply. Just create more gas, just create more steak, and the price comes down. That's what he's saying. You've got to produce your way out of this. Manchin said, quote, if you think that you're going to wait on the Federal Reserve to raise rates to discourage you from buying anything, and that's going to take care of our inflation, that's not how you take care of inflation, end quote. Of course, economists disagree. Famed economist Nouriel Roubini, no big fan of mine, or I'm no fan of his, called for the Federal Reserve to take even more aggressive action, raise rates even more. We've got to raise them above 5%. Inflation's getting out of control. We need to make people broke. You don't understand. If they're not broke, they're going to keep buying things. Oh, yeah, or we could just produce more. All right. Okay. Nonpartisan analysis studied the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a pared down version of the Build Back Better. We discussed that. And they said that impact on inflation will be negligible, if at all. Quote, in calendar year 2022, enacting the bill would have no effect on inflation in the CBO's assessment. Now, who the heck is this CBO? Oh, that's the Congressional Budget Office. Oh, yeah, that's the government. So in the government's own assessment, it's not going to have any effect. The Penn-Wharton budget model reached the same conclusion. The act would have no meaningful effect on inflation in the near term, but would reduce inflation by around 0.1%. It could adjust it by 0.1%, maybe, by the middle of the first decade. So in 5 years, maybe we'll get a 0% reduction. I mean, are they splitting hairs? That's statistically no different than zero. Okay, 0.1. Like, whatever. I mean, these guys. But let's dig into this a little bit more for a second, okay? This happened. It's happening. Okay, so what? What's interesting is that there's so few reporters that want to mention that this Inflation Reduction Act is an actual fraud, right? A fraud, a scam. When I've signed up for something, I've agreed to buy something, but you've delivered me something else than I've bought. I signed on to reduce inflation, but you're not reducing inflation. That's a fraud. Why are no reporters asking that question? Instead, they stand around clapping. Another milestone. Yay, another milestone. Like a bunch of seals barking. Something happened, right? It was transformational. It was monumental. It was a game changer. That's what they told us. Let's hear from their own mouths. Here's CNN. CNN says, as the bill came closer to being signed into law, more media outlets began referring to it as a, quote, climate and health bill instead, citing that nearly $369 billion of the $400 billion going towards investments. Going towards investments in energy security and climate change. That's per CNN. That's their words. So outlets stopped referring to it as Inflation Reduction Act and started referring to it as Climate and Health Bill because it's an investment in energy security and climate change. Okay, and then that's the CNN. Here's New York Times. Again, talking about the investment angle, New York Times says, the bill signed into law by President Biden on Tuesday makes $369 billion in climate and energy investments, by far the largest such investment in American history. So they are telling you right now you got scammed. You signed up, the American people, apparently, that's what Biden said, the American people wanted to stand up to reduce inflation, the Inflation Reduction Act, but instead they got sold a different bill of goods than they hoped for, and that's an investment into climate energy investments, which again, per the survey, less than 1% of people care about that. Now, calling it an investment is also a lie. So it's an investment. Okay, so the media told us that, so we didn't really get scammed. They told us it was an investment, that's what we got. Well, that's a lie too. If you were a stock promoter, you would go to jail for making the claims that they've made. If the SEC, obviously had any teeth and they were on the case. An investment is something a person makes willingly in the hope of a gain. The Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to call IRA from here on out because it's too many words for me to say. Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, is nothing like an investment. It takes money from at least 150 million unwilling citizens. Remember, it was a 50-50 vote, so we can assume at least half the people didn't want it. So it takes money from half of people that are unwilling. They don't want this. They would never put up the money for this, even if they had the choice. And then it dumps it into an assortment of giveaways and flim-flams and scams and pork, we call it. If it were such a good investment, why do the feds have to force people to make it? It's a good question, isn't it? And in America, per SEC guidelines, we have laws about raising investment funds. Seeking capital investment is a very heavy regulated activity. The SEC requires promoters to be very careful about what they say and to disclose anything and everything that might be relevant, particularly risk factors. Oh, we're going to have fun with this. I'm going to dig into this a little bit more, and then we're going to talk about, well, like I said, Bill Gates' involvement in this. You're going to be surprised. We'll talk about the fact checks and what the IRS is really coming after. And hint, it's you. But today we're looking at politics and finance together. We're talking about this Inflation Reduction Act. We're calling it the IRA for short. And we got scammed. Manchin himself says it will not reduce inflation. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, said it won't reduce inflation. So they sold us something that is a scam. It's not going to reduce inflation. As a matter of fact, as I told you, CNN and New York Times called it an investment. It's actually not. It's not doing that. It's actually most of the money. I haven't added up. 75%, 80% of the money isn't going to reduce inflation. As a matter of fact, it's an investment into energy and climate change. But we thought it was for reducing inflation. It's a scam. All right. Now we're talking about the making the case for the inflation at all. Now, like I said, if they were literally trying to raise money in this way, people would be going to jail over this, because you can't. Right? Investments require lots of disclaimers. They require not only truth in the offering, but disclaimers in the risks, as well as proposed timeframes of returns on investments and things like that. Of course, this does none of that. Now, as I said, there's some interesting pieces too, because the holdout that really killed the original bill, which is the Build Back Better bill, then it got revisited or revived here under the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. And we talked about how Senator Manchin has been the holdout here. And what was interesting I saw this week is that, surprise, 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 Bill Gates pops his head up again. Bill Gates, the do-gooder that nobody wants his help. Look, we don't want your help, Bill. Stay home, help yourself, help your friends, help your family, help people that want it. We don't need you in every area of life. Nobody made you the king of the world. You don't need to tell us what kind of fake meat we should eat and what kind of substance we should inject into our body. We don't need you to tell us what politicians we have in office or that we need to darken the sky. And we don't need you to ramrod a bill through that's a false bill of goods and a scam that got pushed on the public. But don't let that go by, because Bill Gates is going to do it anyway. It was Bill Gates who personally lobbied Manchin in a stealth campaign for climate change. Say it again. Bill Gates personally lobbied Manchin in a stealth campaign. Microsoft founder Bill Gates personally lobbied Senator Joe Manchin for months in support of the progressive climate and energy legislation that eventually passed. Gates' campaign, as well as maneuvering from environmental renewable energy lobbyists, eventually helped the two senators reach a deal and pass the Inflation Reduction Act. Wait a minute. Again, I'll go back to it again. So Gates, he lobbied him on progressive climate energy legislation, and then he had to get help from environmental and renewable energy lobbyists to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. You just can't make this stuff up. Gates wasn't the only one trying to soften Manchin, and the campaign included a cohort of lobbyists and activists who eventually convinced him that the climate, tax, and healthcare bill that eventually passed would benefit the economy. So the climate and tax and healthcare bill that passed, wait, I thought it was an Inflation Reduction Act. Dang it. You lied to me again. Do you see how dirty this is? So let's dig into the facts about this. So per heritage.org, they fact-checked Team Biden on this. And specifically, how is it going to reduce inflation? Well, they plan to take $80 billion of that money and hire 87,000 new IRS agents who are going to come after you. Now, Biden said it of his own words that if you make under $400,000, your taxes aren't going up. If you make under $400,000, you're not our target. We want to go target those rich people. You know, those greedy rich people who got rich by stealing from you. They're evil, and we need to go get their money. They got to pay their fair share, right? But that's not the case. It says here, the Biden administration has promised not to raise taxes on anyone making under $400,000 a year. As a matter of fact, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen sent a letter Wednesday to IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig that includes this statement, quote, I direct any additional resources, including any new personnel or auditors that are hired, shall not be used to increase the share of small businesses or households below the $400,000 threshold that are audited. Okay, so that's what she says. And then Rettig from the IRS, he sent a letter to U.S. senators declaring the same objective. He says, quote, these resources are absolutely not about increasing audit scrutiny on small businesses or middle-income Americans. Okay. And they wanted to put a provision in the bill that said we will not audit or increase audits on people making less than $400,000. But all the Democrats that sided on this bill, they shot that down. Nope, we're not going to shoot that down. But wait a minute, you said you're not going to try to go after the people making less than $400,000. That came out of Biden's own mouth. And even Janet Yellen and the head of the IRS both said that they want that. Oh, never mind. It says, considering the sheer magnitude of 87,000 new IRS agents and an estimated $200 billion in new revenues from enforcement, is it possible for all those new audits and revenues to involve only taxpayers making over $400,000? Well, let's do the math. We have fairy tale land that Biden and his team run in, and then we have the real world, like, math, facts, right? Constraints. So if we return the 2010 audit rates for all individuals making over $400,000, that would generate only 28% or $9 billion of the estimated $35 billion in new IRS enforcement revenues. Okay, so that's not enough. Even increasing recent audit rates 30-fold for taxpayers making over $400,000, including a 100% audit rate on taxpayers with incomes over $10 million, still would come 20% short of the goal. Okay, so if we, so it looks like we can't get it. Note, this assumes a 98% increase in the number of tax filers making over $400,000 between 2019 and 2030, based on annual growth rates between 2014 and 2019. So they're saying there's just no way for it to happen. What about this? Auditing every single taxpayer with annual income over $1 million would require only 25,000 new agents. So why are they hiring 87,000 new agents? You see, there's like math here. Something like math. It doesn't add up. The true intent of the IRS, according to a 2021 report from the Government's Accountability Office, quote, from fiscal years 2010 to 2021, the majority of the additional taxes IRS recommended from audits came from taxpayers with incomes below $200,000. So wait a minute. The majority of the money that we picked up comes from the taxpayers below $200,000. That's who we have to go after. That recommendation is based on audits of lower income tax returns producing more bang for the buck, end quote. So wait, the money we get is from the low income people. Audits of the lowest income taxpayers give us the highest additional tax per audit hour compared to all income groups. Higher rates of return from auditing low-income households alongside the average large corporate tax filings of nearly 6,000 pages says that our current tax code is far too complex. That's the reality here. So hopefully that makes sense. One, the Inflation Reduction Act is not going to reduce inflation. Manchin said it himself. He said, why would it? Two, mainstream media stopped even saying that it was going to do that, and they said instead it was an investment into climate and health, which nobody asked for. As a matter of fact, it's less than 1% of people's concerns. So we were scammed. On top of it, calling it an investment is also a scam, and legally that would wind up in jail if you were really had a real investment, because you can't throw that type of words around. We also see Bill Gates is behind this, lobbying it, and the fact check shows that they are coming after you if you make less than 200,000, and the less you make, the more of a target you are because you have more to get. Anyway, you're listening to the Mark Moss Show. We're talking about the decentralized revolution, the way the world is changing right before our very eyes. And that's what I got for you today. Thanks for listening. Since you've stayed to the end, I know you like this video, which means you're probably gonna really like this video right here and this video right here.